Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Real Talk with Rhi. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today we are talking about quite a big thing in the life of a child, in the life of a parent, especially if you are dealing with additional learning needs, neurodiversity. I guess today I'm specifically talking about autism because this podcast episode is inspired by a question sent in by a viewer, a listener, a subscriber. So the question in question is how best to prepare when your child with autism is going to high school. Interestingly, by the way, she used the term high school. There are so many different terms just within the UK that refer to this same type of school. So we are talking about the transition from primary school specifically to secondary school, high school, comprehensive school. I'm sure there are some other terms. If you're watching here on YouTube, then you can comment below and let me know what that type of school, that secondary education from 11 plus grammar school, I guess would be another one, would be called where you are. If you are tuning in the audio version of this podcast, unfortunately, I don't think there's a way you can comment, but you can head on over to YouTube and leave me a comment on the video version and make sure you subscribe to the channel while you're at it. So anyway, we're talking specifically about this transition from primary school, which is very much, by the time the children get to year 6 in primary school, they're very much a big fish in a small pond, and they're about to move to these big schools, these very big schools. And this is such a daunting thing to happen for any child, especially the kids I really felt for were the ones that had no transition, no preparation. Those COVID kids that had to go from year 6 to year 7. Normally they'd be nurtured through, even the children without any additional needs would be nurtured through with transition days, would be nurtured through with going to do some sort of event, like a sporting event or going to watch a performance or whatever in the secondary school. And those children didn't have any of that. And that must have been so hard for them. So my heart really does go out to those children. So what we really want to do is the absolute opposite of what those children had to do, and to make sure our children are ever so prepared for this next stage, and to make sure we're prepared too. And there are a number of things that we can do that we're going to talk about today. But ultimately, I think if your child has autism, and obviously I can't speak for every person on the planet with autism, but my experience, all my 4 children have autism, the better prepared they are, the more they are able to thrive, the more they're able to enjoy things, the more they're able to relax. And from my understanding, from my comments from you lovely people, you lovely listeners, this seems to be a pretty common theme. So preparation is key, getting organised, being prepared. And today we're going to talk about exactly how we can do that. So we're going to assume that you've already chosen a school for your child. And if you're watching at the time that this episode goes out, it is currently May, you will know where your child is going to be going this September. You already would have had your child's place accepted, so you'll know which school they're going to be in. You probably won't know which form they're going to be in yet. You won't know which form tutor they're going to have. Possibly you'll have no experience with the school that they're going to at all if you haven't had other children going through that school. Especially if you're from a different area, you might not even be familiar with that school, from its reputation that much. So this can be very stressful and quite a daunting experience for both parents and children. So ultimately, the first thing to do is to do your research. So I'm assuming if you've chosen this school for your child, then you've probably been for a little look around. You probably went to some sort of open evening. If you are listening and your child is in year 5 and having to do the options in year 6, make sure that when those open evenings come up, then you really take that opportunity to go and get a feel for the school. And if you have not been to an open evening, do not be afraid of phoning up the school and asking for a tour, asking if there's someone that can show you round. It's really helpful when making these choices to have the opportunity to not just read the reports, look at their website, you can see the school's social media and stuff, but to really be able to just get a feel for the school. Does it seem like a positive place? Is it well maintained? Do the children there seem generally happy? Or, obviously this is only a very small snapshot you're going to be able to get, but being able to have a little look around is super important. So assuming you've already done that, you've chosen the child's place, the next stage is to forge some relationships with the school. If you've got a child with autism or any other additional learning needs, there will be an additional learning needs coordinator. They could be called an ALENCO, additional learning needs coordinator, a SENCO, special educational needs coordinator, they're sometimes called. So you can find out from the school's website who this is, or you can just call the school office and ask to be put through to them. So the SENCO, the ALENCO will be your point of contact for this transition if you've got a child with additional learning needs. Now, I know I get a lot of people saying, but the thing is, my child hasn't had the assessment yet, so they're on the pathway. We've got concerns, but they've not yet fully been diagnosed. My advice to you would be to contact the ALENCO, contact the SENCO in the school, and just act as if. So act as if you know your child has needs, that's why they're on the pathway. Not having a piece of paper to confirm that shouldn't actually stop your child being able to access what they actually need. If your child needs help and support with this transition, waiting for some arbitrary piece of paper shouldn't put a stop to that. So you can contact them and say, look, my child is on this pathway, but they have these needs. They are not going to cope well with this transition without your support. So I'm going to ask for your support. You might be able to speak to your primary school if it is a feeder primary school and they have a relationship with the secondary school that your child is going to find out who it is best to speak to, who they found helpful, because a lot of primary schools that are feeder schools for certain secondary schools have these really, really great relationships, and they'll do an actual handover between the schools. Now, obviously, if your child is going to a different school from their friends, or just not the feeder school they're generally going to be sent to, this won't be an option, but it is something worth considering and speaking to your actual primary school about who best to contact. And that way you can actually be like, Mr. Jones from so-and-so schools referred me on and suggested I contact you, and it kind of gives that warm lead, that warm introduction. Anyway, so you get in touch with the ALENCO, the SENCO, and just explain who you are, explain the needs of your child. And my suggestion would be, as face-to-face is back and has been for some time, so to make the most of this and to ask to go in for a face-to-face meeting. I think that having spoken to someone on the phone or just emailed them gives you some idea or some information, but once you've met somebody and you've got a face to that name, and maybe more importantly, they've got your face to a name, when you go back and you perhaps have concerns or you've got problems that need sorting down the line, they know who you are, and you're starting to build these relationships, because the relationship with this person going forward will be the one where if you do have any issues, that will be your point of contact, in addition to form tutors and other things that we'll go into. So getting in touch with the SENCO, the ALENCO, and asking for a preliminary meeting to discuss your child's needs can be a really, really good idea. Then obviously doing as much research as possible before the next stage, which I would suggest you ask your SENCO, the ALENCO, if they are able to provide a tour for your child. And this was so helpful to us. So we booked a tour for my son, who recently, he's in year 7 now, so did this transition. And the ALENCO at the school was just amazing, just so amazing. So prior to the tour, this is where we did a little bit of the research. So we sat down together, we looked at the school website. If there is a school map, that can be really handy for kids who like that kind of thing to have a look at, to kind of get a feel for the place. If you can perhaps visit the site out of hours, just drive to it, so they've got a feel for maybe where it is, how they might get there, what it looks like, that kind of thing. If the school has any videos on its website, that kind of thing. Just take a look before you take your child to this initial meeting, at any online stuff, photographs, videos, that kind of thing at the school. Then perhaps I would suggest, just doing a little drive-by, having a little look, and then ultimately taking your child for this tour if the Elenco is able to arrange it. And then honestly, I think this made such a difference for my son. The Elenco in the school was just so patient, so amazing. Went round for a total tour of the school and talked through the building, which areas were a one-way system, which blocks different things were in. The whole thing was very chilled. It was done after school where there were not loads of other, really big kids. Because let's face it, some schools, the kids are up to age 16. Some schools, the kids are up to age 18, depending in the UK. Obviously, it's different in other countries, but in the UK, you go up to GCSE level at age 16 or up to A levels at age 18. And you're coming in at, let's face it, some of the children going up to secondary school might not be 11 until August. So they might still be 10. They might be really little. And so to arrange a tour in the middle of the day where there's lots of children going around can feel quite overwhelming. So we went on this tour after school. The building was really quiet. And this was done in advance of any of the standard transition activities, because you tend to find after the GCSE period has wound down and the year 11s have left for their exams and things, then the secondary schools will tend to put the transition events for the year 6s that they're about to welcome into the school in that period. So it will generally be very late June and earlier July that these year 6 transition events will occur. So you want to try and get one of these tours for your child before those events, if you possibly can, because those events will generally be, they're not designed to be overwhelming, but for a child with autism could still be quite overwhelming because you're generally going up when the school is busy. It's generally with the whole class, so it could still feel quite overwhelming. And I felt that for my son to go and have this super chilled look around and this just real feel for the place, so he wasn't going in totally blind, whereas I felt a lot of his friends were when they went up for those transition days. So this tour was super helpful. And then the next step from there is to obviously make sure you've plotted out all of the transition days into your diary so that you know that you're not kind of bookending these days, which can be quite overwhelming, with any other things. It's not the time to be staying up late the night before or booking in lots of activities the evening of these kind of events. So obviously, depending on which school your child's going to be attending will depend which transition events will be offered. They might be an hour session where the children all go in. It might be when the school is putting on a performance, then the year 6s are invited to watch it. That happens quite a lot. They might put on a sporting event. There might be a musical event where anyone that plays an instrument in the year 6 being welcomed into year 7 gets to go to that. And there may be half or full days or even a week of taster sessions. Now, I know some kids I've heard in other schools, so my son only started doing transition days from year 6, but some of them I've heard doing transition days as young as year 5 and even year 4. And personally, I think this is fantastic. If your child is heading up to a new school, the younger they can be really gently introduced to it and have this vague idea of where they're going, the better it'll be. And I feel that for my girls who will be then going into the same school as my son, they're going to find it an easier transition because they went on this tour. So this private tour that my son went on with the Elenco, the girls went to, and at the time Zara was in year 1, and obviously she wouldn't be going to this school until she's in year 7. So having that kind of, oh, that's where I'll be going one day, it's ages away, I don't need to worry yet, I think is quite nice. So yeah, definitely the earlier you can get prepared, the better. So anyway, get these transition days. That's what we're talking about, isn't it? So getting off topic a bit. So these transition days need to get put in your diary. And then on these transition days, you may get to know who your child's form tutor is. Again, it's really good to forge a relationship with your child's form tutor. This will be your main point of contact if you have any child going to a new school. But then obviously, if you've got a child with additional learning needs, then the Senko Elenco will be a really important point of contact too. The other person to get to know will probably be your child's head of year. And as soon as you find out who these people are, if there's an opportunity to introduce yourself, to get a feel for who this person is, how approachable they are, and which method of getting in touch with people should you have a problem will be best. So is it email? Is it phone? Will there be some app? Which brings me on to one of the next things that you need to do, which is find out about all the ways of the school. So lots of schools these days have apps that they run everything through. It's where they deliver homework. It's where they send out newsletters. It's where they ask for payment. Some schools have 2, 3, even 4 different apps that you've got to use. Sometimes things like Google Classroom will be used. You just need to find out which of the school's apps you're going to need and which ones your child is going to need. And that way you can prepare your child and your devices for these apps, because ultimately being able to stay on top of what is going on in school for both you and your child will make the whole system, just the whole school week, school terms, everything go so much smoother. Because being on the back foot and being like, oh, I didn't know there was a so-and-so due then, or I had to send money for this, can be really, really stressful. And ultimately there is a lot more to organise from that point of view. When your child goes to secondary school, they're going from usually having 1, maybe 2 teachers, maybe one element of, support staff, a teaching assistant, something like that in the classroom, to going to have, I don't know, maybe 10 different subjects, maybe 5 different subjects a day, maybe 6 different subjects a day, plus a form tutor. And they're suddenly going to be exposed to all these different adults. And the way that you used to communicate in primary school, which may have felt quite easy, where you just hand them over to one teacher in the morning, you say, oh, they're having this kind of day, they're having a rough day, they're having a bad, whatever. And then you get fed back again at the end of the day, yeah, they've been good today, or oh, they've had a bit of a wobble today. You kind of end up missing that when they go to secondary school, which can feel really, really daunting, because as a parent with additional learning needs, you may or may not have figured out by now, the more of a relationship you can forge with your child's teachers, the easier life can be, because you can tell them what's going on in your child's life, they can cater for it, and vice versa. You can better gauge how their day has gone and then know how best you can support them in the evenings. So ultimately, you're going to need to look at what the new forms of communication will be and how you can best negotiate that. So will there be, like I say, apps? If you have concerns, how do you get in touch? Is it through an app? Is it through an email? And having all of those details there laid out for you is really, really important at the beginning, rather than waiting until a problem occurs and then panicking because you can't get in touch with the right person. So I definitely look at setting up a routine for your child and not leaving it until the first week of September to do this. Have a look at what their week is going to look like. Perhaps do some practice school runs with them, especially as you move from the primary to the secondary school system. Then things can change. If you've got a child with additional learning needs, it's possible they won't be taking the public transportation or walking by themselves, but maybe they will, depending upon their needs. How will that journey to school look? How much independence will they now have? How much will they be expected to remember for themselves versus how much prompting will they be having? And these things need to kind of be considered. So morning routine and evening routine, I can't harp on about them enough, really. They make such a difference to the week going smoothly, as well as weekend routine, making sure that everything's prepared. So I'm not going to go into routine massively in this episode, but it is something I can talk about endlessly. Let me know if you want me to chat about that on a separate episode of the podcast. But if you head over to my main Mummy of 4 UK channel, I've got lots of videos about routine, morning routines, evening routines, weekend routines. But ultimately, it's just about kind of automating things, taking the decision fatigue away, and just having everyone knowing this is what happens at this time, then we do this, then we do this, and then it just makes life so much easier, knowing what time things are going off. So our routine, just to very, very briefly go over it, everybody gets up, the children clean their teeth and get dressed. In the mornings, they have alarms going off to tell them when it is time to do this. And then for my girls, I still do their hair. And then there's an alarm to go off to say, hey kids, it's breakfast time. And the reasons I have these alarms are just so I don't have to constantly clock watch, and so that it's an alarm telling everyone, hey, it's time to do the next thing now, rather than me having to nag constantly. And then there's another alarm going, hey, had a breakfast, time to clear up, everyone stop chatting, clear up. And then another one that goes off when it's time to be like, right, okay, shoes and coats on. So just to give you, a general overview of it, but figure out what routine is going to work best for you, and just keep communicating with your child through all this. Say, right, this is what's going to work, what do you think is going to work best? Establishing these routines together where you can kind of agree, right, how much time do we think we need for breakfast? And let's work it backwards, right? What time are we going to have to get to school? And all this information about the times for the school day and things will generally be on the school's website. What time do we have to get to school? Okay, how much time do we need to allow to get to school? What will the journey look like? How much of a buffer time do we want to allow in the mornings? And then working it backwards, how much time do we want for breakfast? And then working it backwards from there, how much time do we need to get ready? And therefore, what time do we need to be getting up? And you can calculate these things together. It helps to empower your child to feel involved, have a little bit of autonomy over their day, but also to work out a structure that's going to work, that's not going to leave everyone in a totally stressed out flap every school morning. Getting organised in advance with the things that you're going to need and way in advance of back to school, I'd highly recommend. So obviously, while school shoes I'd probably leave till pretty much the last minute, because children's feet, they grow like mad, don't they? And they tend to do it just at the last minute before school. But there are so many other things you can start, making lists, preparing for. There'll be lists of what the children need for school uniform on the school's website, where you need to get it. Think about getting that stuff towards the beginning of the school holidays rather than towards the end, because often there are shortages and all that stuff. There'll be so much back to school content coming over on my main Mummy of 4 channel. We'll probably do some chats about it here on the podcast. So make sure you are subscribed for all of that. But in essence, getting the stuff organised in plenty of time. So again, there's no last minute flapping. And panicking in September is really, really important, but also as especially important for children with extrasensory needs, such as autism, making sure that everything is tried on, that everything has been washed so it feels and smells in a way that is going to make your child feel comfortable, so that labels are not digging in, there's nothing causing like itchy, scratchy feelings, because if you've got children with autism, you'll know that this is enough to ruin their day. And if you've got all that kind of itchy, scratchy, doesn't feel good on top of the overwhelm of having to start a new place, then that can feel really quite stressful. So getting all this stuff in advance so that they're comfortable with it, they've tried it on, that they could spend some time wearing it if you think that would help around the house, just to kind of wear things in. I definitely think this is probably like close to September, but wearing in school shoes. I mean, we've all had those days where you've worn a new pair of shoes and they've rubbed and you've got a blister. Imagine having scratchy clothes plus a blister plus having to deal with a brand new overwhelming school environment all in one day. That's not what you want to do. So you want to try and make sure that things like shoes are worn in, things like clothes are tried on. So just to minimize all the other things that could possibly go wrong. And then if your child is, prepared for the place and you've got the uniforms feeling good and things, then they're just in the best possible position with the best possible chance of thriving and just enjoying school. One of the biggest things I think I definitely recommend is the folder system. So the folder system is quite simple. You just have one folder, like an A4 popper folder per lesson, plus one for pastoral, homework diaries, that kind of thing. And then all you've got to do, if your child's got 5 subjects a day, they just pack the 5 folders for those 5 subjects plus their pastoral folder, and that's what goes in their bags. If they've got 6 subjects a day, then the 6 go in, plus the pastoral folder, you get the gist. And if your child needs a little bit of help and prompting, you can be like, right, it's time to pack your bag. So, when they come home from school, then you take out the folders, you see which homework is needed, you plan out when that's going to be done, put those folders away, and then pack the folders for the next day. This system is an absolute game changer, because you otherwise end up with bits of scraggy paper or things lost and things all crumpled or not having the right books. This system is just quite simple. If they're given an exercise book, a textbook, a piece of paper, and it's for geography, it goes in the geography folder, and everything is in that one folder. If some subjects are quite like booklet heavy, like the boys would always end up with lots of science booklets. Other subjects would, like their maths, would tend to be more in actual exercise books, but then maybe they'd have like 3 different exercise books for 3 different types of maths. So having these folders just has been an absolute game changer. And I had a chat with Will about this. I think it was an evening routine video recently over on my main channel. And he was just like, yeah, I said, is the folder system helping you? He said, yeah, definitely. I just don't forget things and I don't get in trouble. So yeah, can't recommend that highly enough. So sensory needs that need to be addressed for moving to secondary school. How does your child deal with overwhelm? Do they use ear defenders? I know a friend of mine's little girl has got some inner ear defenders. I think they're called loops. We don't actually have any in our household, but they look fantastic. Shout out down in the comments if anyone has seen them or tried them. But they ultimately are just far more discreet than the big kind of over the ear headphone looking ear defenders. And they just slot into your child's ear, kind of like an AirPod or a hearing aid kind of would, sitting in just inside their ear. And it just filters out some of the noise, which can be really overwhelming for kids with autism. So something like that might be worth looking into and definitely having a little practice with over the summer. Perhaps if they're not used to visiting slightly busier places, perhaps wean some of those types of places into their routine before starting. So for example, lunchtime can be quite busy, can't it, in like a secondary school environment. So perhaps going to some sort of more bustling cafeteria type places to eat and seeing how they cope with that kind of louder environment. If it's not something that they're currently used to, it might be worth a go over the summer just to kind of have a little practice. It's important to encourage self-advocacy, and this can be really, really difficult, especially if you've got children with autism and you're used to kind of helping them out with a lot of things. But one thing I've been doing with my children is trying not to jump in too quickly. And it's so hard, it really is. But sometimes as parents, we just want to jump in and fix things really, really quickly. But this doesn't encourage our children to develop these self-advocacy skills. So if we're normally just fixing things for them and then we're not there, that can be very, very difficult. So what I'm trying to do is when my children are saying, oh, this is broken, or, you know, I've got I feel this, or whatever it might be. Basically, they're coming to me saying they have a big feeling about something. I'm trying to say to them, right, what do you need? Which words do you need to use to get what you need? Because ultimately, what I really hope that my children are able to do when I'm not there is to identify what the problem is and to be able to go to another adult and say, please can I have help with XYZ? So rather than just fixing something, I'm trying to say in a gentle way while supporting them, okay, so what do you need? Which words do you need to use now to get what you need to solve this problem? So it could be, can you help me fix this, please? Or it can be, so like, I'm hungry. Like, okay, so what do you need? Can I please have a snack? Yeah, great. It could be, just trying to think of examples now off the top of my head. It could be, I don't know where my whatever is. So I'm trying to get them to say, well, can you help me find whatever it is? Because I'm just trying to think, you know, which situations might they come up against in a classroom situation? You know, if they can't find something, or they're lost in a corridor, they can't find something. I'm hoping that then we're starting to build the skills to be able to ask for help to find where they need to be or whatever they've lost or whatever it is. So however this kind of looks in your house, just try and think, and it's really, it is quite a challenge for me actually, rather than just kind of jumping in and fixing things and helping them, to take that beat and say, well, you know, what do you need? Which words do you need to ask for help with getting what you need? And so far, I feel it's been working quite well. It's a good idea to keep an eye on your children's stress levels and to start building coping strategies that they are going to be able to use, that they can learn now when they're at home with you or while they're still in their primary school environment, that hopefully then they can utilize if they are moving up into this definitely busier and potentially more stressful environment. So that might look like being able to identify when we're feeling a bit off and this is not necessarily easily. Not all adults can do this. It does not come naturally. But being able to identify when we're feeling a bit off, being able to then realize there's something that we need to do. There are steps we need to take in order to feel better. So maybe it's like, okay, I'm feeling stressed and overwhelmed. I'm going to take a moment and I'm going to take some deep breaths. It could be something as simple as that. And practicing this stuff home or asking your child's primary school teacher to start to practice these things with them can help them when they are in the secondary school environment. And ultimately, they've got lots of different teachers that won't know them as personally as their primary school teachers do. I mean, how could they when you've got 10 different teachers and the 10 different teachers have all got 5 different classes or 7 different classes or whatever it might be? It's just, there's a lot more, there are a lot more adults your children can be dealing with. There are a lot more kids that each of those teachers are going to be dealing with and just not going to know them all as well, which is why it's so important to foster those relationships between you and your child's form teacher, your child's special needs coordinator, so they can then ensure it's their job to ensure that all the other teachers are understanding your children's needs. And granted, it won't be that in-depth relationship that you will have with that form tutor or with the special needs coordinator, but it's their job to kind of make sure that information is passed on and your child, is happy and taken care of. But there may be some sort of support, actually. A lot of secondary schools do have support in the form of kind of classes or specific strategies to support children when they're feeling overwhelmed. So it's definitely worth asking, what does that look like? And if they've got specific strategies that school likes to use, then to make your child aware of that before they go and also practice that kind of thing. So maybe, I don't know, there's a special place that they can go that's a bit quieter if they're feeling overwhelmed, and then you can start to kind of practice this in your own home. You can be like, right, okay, so in our own home, if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed, you can go to this area. Remember, when you go to school, you can go to the calming room or whatever it's called, and just kind of start to build up this recognition of, okay, I am feeling a certain way, and when I'm feeling overwhelmed, then I need to take these steps. And ultimately, there's going to be a lot more independence that they're going to have. And again, depending on your child's specific needs, this could look quite different. But now's the time to start thinking, how much are you doing for your child and how much are you encouraging and enabling your child to do for themselves? So this could be like really basic things like taking ownership of their own space, and do they clean their rooms themselves? Do you do it with them, or do you just do it for them? And if you're doing it totally for them, it could be a good time to start saying, right, okay, we're going to encourage some independence and encourage you to perhaps keep your room tidy or to do it together. It may not be perfect, but it is a good sort of baby step towards a little bit more independence. But really what your child's independence is going to look like, obviously, it's your child, you're the parent. It will depend on their specific needs, but it's a good time to start thinking about it in advance of this transition rather than leaving it all the way right up until September and they still have no independence at all, and suddenly they're chucked very much in the deep end of this new big school. So another thing I definitely recommend doing is, as soon as you know which form your child's going to be in, if they're going with children from their existing primary school, then you really try and build and foster relationships with children that they're going to be in classes with. They won't necessarily be put with their friends. And obviously, if they're going to a brand new school, then they may not know anyone at all. But if there are mixer events, perhaps they're not in, the school that they're not going to a feeder school then. Well, they're not coming from a feeder school, sorry. If they don't know anyone from their class that's going to be in their new class, but maybe you've got a family friend that's got a child in that school, maybe it's even someone in an older year. If you can make a point of catching up with those people, so they've just got a familiar face that they can see in the corridors, then that can really, really help. But definitely, if you know there are children that are going to be in your child's class, definitely make sure that those children have exchanged numbers if they've got mobile phones. If you can encourage play dates, have them over the house, just make sure that they're going in with solid friends, because if they have that opportunity, then that really is going to make life so much easier for all of you. And then ultimately, you need to be kind to yourself, because as a parent of a child taking this big leap, it can feel massive and it can feel quite scary. Ultimately, for me, I worried about the transition. I felt we did a lot for the transition, and I feel the transition went smoother than I ever could have hoped for, probably because we had done so much preparation. And I'm really thrilled to say now that Will's in year 7. He's really thriving and seems to genuinely love school, which is just more than I ever could have hoped for. And I don't know, I just think I worried about it ultimately then more than he did. And I don't think my worries were unfounded, because I still believe that if we hadn't taken the steps, then things perhaps wouldn't have gone as well as they did. But I just think you need to give yourself a bit of grace. You need to give yourself a bit of kindness, because ultimately it's the same when your children are starting primary school. You're starting primary school all over again too. You're having to deal with mums in the yard, and it's all a big change. It's all a big transition, and this is a very different transition, but it's a big adjustment for you too. You know, they're going from being in probably very small schools up to very big schools, and that can feel quite daunting thing to send your baby into, in effect, because you know, at 11 they're still babies, aren't they? So if you are one of those parents and your little baby's going up to big school, then I am sending you a big virtual hug, because I do get how intimidating that can be and how intimidating that can feel. But ultimately, you know, being prepared can make the whole process so much easier for everyone involved. So I hope some of these things that we've chatted about today have helped. Let me know down in the comments if your kiddo is starting big school soon. If you are listening on the podcast in your ears as opposed to the video podcast, please do rate and review. It really helps to support the podcast. If you're on YouTube, or if you're not watching on YouTube, head over to YouTube, hit the subscribe button on Real Talk with Rhi, ring the bell to make sure you aren't missing future episodes, all that kind of thing. And I'll see you next week for another episode. Bye.